In the shadowed corners of medieval Poland, there lies a legend darker than most, one that blurs the line between superstition and cold, brutal reality. A tale so terrifying it resonates through time, leaving a chilling echo in the hearts of those who dare to remember it. A young bride, her body draped in white, lying beneath the earth, alive yet suffocating, choking on the weight of her family's ancient twisted belief. What happened to her? Was she truly buried alive, or is this merely a story built on fear and folklore? We may never know the truth, but this tragic tale is bound to haunt us, much like the ominous presence of death itself. Stay with us as we uncover the story of a family's dark superstition, a love twisted by fate, and a bride whose final moments were swallowed by the cold, unfeeling earth. If you're intrigued, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Prepare yourself for a journey into the chilling history of medieval Poland, where the line between life and death was all too often blurred. In the dense forests and quiet villages of Poland, where the chill of winter cuts deep into the bone and superstition runs as thick as the fog, there was a family that held an eerie belief. To them, death was a lurking specter, watching from the periphery of life. Their fears were as primal as they were ancient, rooted in the belief that death didn't always come with the finality they imagined. And so, in an act of unthinkable cruelty, a bride, young, full of life, and about to embark on a future of joy, found herself subject to a family's terrifying tradition. This chilling tale, filled with dread and darkness, is not just the story of a girl lost to an ancient superstition. It's the story of the crushing weight of fear, ignorance, and the tragic results of a family's blind devotion to an unsettling belief. The night she was buried, there was no celebration, no music, no guests. There was only the oppressive silence of a darkened village, the hollow sound of footsteps on damp earth, and the cold grasp of dread that seemed to creep into every corner. What happened in those final moments? Was she conscious when they lowered her into the grave? The chilling silence of that night speaks volumes, as her fate, once sealed by the very people who should have protected her, was left to the whims of a superstition that demanded death to prove life. The earth that closed over her body did not distinguish between fear and love, between life and death. In the end, it was the family's belief that would haunt them forever. In the rolling hills of medieval Poland, where the frost bit deeper than most could bear and the winds howled through the skeletal branches of the trees, the line between life and death was often blurred by ancient superstitions. These were times when the past wasn't just remembered, it was lived, woven into the very fabric of everyday life. And in one such village, nestled within the shadow of a towering forest, there was a family whose beliefs were darker than most. They were not a family of wealth or power, nor did they possess any special grace. They were common people, but they harbored a secret that would curse them for generations. It wasn't uncommon in those days for death to be a constant companion. Disease, starvation, the brutality of nature, these were all frequent visitors. But for this family, death wasn't something as simple as a final exhale. No, to them, death was a specter that could linger, an unwelcome guest who would often arrive uninvited, yet with a face that seemed to bear familiarity. The head of the family, a stoic man named Mieszko, had long been a believer in the unshakable power of death's shadow. His wife Helga shared his faith, although theirs was not a religious faith, but a primal belief rooted in superstition. They believed that there were times when the living were not truly alive. The idea that someone could be buried while still breathing, a victim of a momentary weakness of the body, filled them with dread. And so the family's darkest fear was simple yet horrifying, that death was not always final. Sometimes in the deep sleep of illness or in the stupor of a fainting spell, life could be mistaken for death. And in these moments of misconception, the living could be buried in their graves, alive but trapped beneath the weight of the earth. In this family, these beliefs were not only respected, they were enforced. They had seen it happen in the village. Tales were told of fainting fits, of death that arrived too swiftly and then retreated, leaving the victim alive and buried beneath a mound of dirt. The family's solution to this fear was cruel, yet simple. If they could not be sure, they would ensure it by burying the living in such a way that they would never rise again. It was a nightmarish belief that brought tragedy to their doorstep. But this superstition was more than just a fear of premature death. It was born from a place of deep love, a twisted form of care. They thought they were protecting themselves from the terror of a loved one being lost to death only to awaken in the grave. In their minds, it was better to be sure, better to bury them alive than to risk them becoming another tragic tale of mistaken death. And so it was that this cruel and archaic practice would become their tradition, passed down through generations, wrapped tightly in the armor of parental love and protective instincts. The day the young girl, Zofia, was born into this world was one of hope and joy. She was the youngest of 4 children, her eyes wide and bright, filled with the promise of life. Her laughter was a melody in the halls of their small cottage, her energy like a spark of light that seemed to shine brighter than the chill of the Polish winters. She grew in the shadow of her family's strange beliefs. The teachings subtly passed to her through whispered conversations and quiet warnings. But as she grew older, she began to notice the weight of it all, the weight of fear that clung to every room, every moment, every word spoken in hushed tones. Though Zofia's childhood was filled with love, there was always an undertone of unease. She was never truly free from the ghostly specter of the family's dark superstition. Her parents, for all their affection, were constantly reminding her to be careful, to never stray too far from the village, to avoid any illness or injury that could bring her closer to death's grip. They would say it in passing, but the words always hung in the air longer than they should have, like a shadow that stretched too far into the light. Zofia, though unaware of the full weight of their beliefs, could feel the pressure building. The village elders, too, would whisper in her presence, their ancient voices carrying the weight of centuries of unshakable tradition. There was one name they spoke with an air of dread, a name that haunted the villages and forests of Poland, the name of the living death. The day she turned 18, Zofia, still as radiant as ever, found herself caught in a web of emotion. She had met a young man, Jan, a blacksmith's son, and the two had fallen deeply in love. Their love was innocent, full of promise, like something pulled straight from the pages of a fairy tale. But as much as she wanted to believe in the possibility of a future, a life that was untouched by the bitter hand of superstition, she could not shake the feeling that the world she lived in was fragile, too fragile to ever allow for happiness. And so, one fateful evening, under a moonlit sky, the family gathered to celebrate the wedding of Zofia and Jan. It should have been a joyous occasion, a symbol of a new beginning. Yet, in the back of Mieszko's mind, a dread lingered, the dread that his daughter might one day find herself in a position where the family's darkest fears would be realized. That night, in the midst of laughter and music, he made a silent vow. The fear that had been passed down through generations would be carried to the grave, and no amount of happiness would undo it. Little did Zofia know that even in the midst of her new life, a shadow of terror was already drawing near. The night of Zofia's wedding was a night that would haunt her for the rest of her existence, though, as fate would have it, she would never live to know the true weight of its tragedy. The village, bathed in the eerie glow of the moon, seemed to breathe with a quiet intensity, as if the very earth sensed the tension that gripped it. It had been a day full of celebration, with music ringing through the air, the scent of roasted meats mingling with the smoke of torches. The village gathered to honor the union of two young souls, and for a brief, fragile moment, everything seemed perfect. Zofia stood before the altar, her cheeks flushed with excitement and a hint of nerves, a picture of innocence and beauty. Her eyes locked with John's, her new husband, both of them filled with dreams of a future bright and untainted. The ceremony was simple but sincere, a sacred bond forged before the gods and their ancestors. Zofia was smiling, her heart racing with the thrill of love, her hands clasped in yawns with a certainty that seemed to defy the harshness of the world around them. But as night fell, the celebration gradually began to slow down, the laughter and dancing fading into soft murmurs. The guests began to trickle away, and Zofia, tired but filled with joy, retired to her new home with John. They would be married in spirit and flesh, a new chapter of their lives opening in front of them, one that promised warmth, security, and love. But as they walked together through the quiet streets of the village, Zofia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was an unease in the air, a feeling that she had learned to associate with the unspoken rules of her family. That evening, as they prepared to lay down in their bed for the first time as husband and wife, Zofia's father, Mieszko, paid a visit to their cottage. He had not come to celebrate. No, his presence was colder, more deliberate. As John greeted him at the door, Zofia watched her father with an expression that was too heavy for such a joyous night. Mieszko's face was grave, as if the celebration had never existed, as if the very air had turned dark with dread. He spoke to John in a voice that was quieter than usual, his words edged with an authority that left no room for argument. Finally, after a tense silence, Mieszko turned to Zofia. His eyes, usually filled with affection, now held a flicker of something else, a coldness, a fear, perhaps even guilt. "Tonight," he said, his voice low, "take care of each other. Do not forget the old ways. Do not forget the ways of the family." Zofia's heart twisted with confusion. What did he mean? What old ways? Her family's traditions had always been strange, but she had never imagined they would overshadow the happiness of this night, the joy of her wedding. Before she could ask, Mieszko left, his footsteps echoing faintly in the dark as he disappeared into the night. Zofia stood there still, her heart heavy. She didn't know what kind of ritual her father was referring to, but the unease lingered, thick and choking, like the stillness before a storm. In the dead of night, as the chill of the Polish winter crept through the cracks in their cottage walls, Zofia fell into an uneasy sleep. The wind howled outside, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo in the silence. The world beyond their door seemed distant, far removed from the life that she had just begun. But in the suffocating warmth of her bed, her thoughts began to turn darker. Her father's warning gnawed at her mind, pulling her into a restless sleep filled with strange, half-formed dreams. It wasn't long before she awoke with a start, her body drenched in cold sweat. Something was wrong. There was a pressure in her chest, a sharpness that didn't belong. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, and her vision blurred. She reached out for John, her hand trembling. "John," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I feel something's wrong." But before she could explain, the world around her seemed to spin. She felt a coldness seep into her very bones, and then everything went black. By the time morning came, Zofia's body lay still. Her breathing, once rapid and shallow, had stopped altogether. Her limbs were cold, her skin as pale as the moonlit snow outside. Her eyes were closed, her expression frozen in a state of shock, perhaps of confusion, maybe of fear. And yet, to her family, the sight was not one of sorrow, but of relief. They saw it as confirmation. The village doctor, summoned by Mieszko, declared her dead. Not a soul questioned it. To them, there was nothing more to be said. Zofia's life had ended too suddenly, too tragically. The cause of her death, unknown but assumed to be some hidden ailment, was beside the point. It was not the illness nor the cause of death that mattered. It was what followed, what was done to her in the dark of night, that would forever change everything. For Zofia's family, there was no question of mourning. There was only a mechanical adherence to tradition. They buried her the next morning in the early hours before the village could fully stir. It wasn't the quiet grief that one might expect. It was more clinical, more hurried. The preparations were swift, as if her family were eager to rid themselves of the uncomfortable weight of her death. They made no ceremony, no prayers. They simply followed what they knew, what they had always known. Her burial was nothing more than a swift act of necessity. And yet, in their hearts, each one of them knew what they were really doing. For Zofia's family, the burial was not about death. It was about safety. It was about ensuring that there was no room for the fear of the living death, the belief that one could awaken beneath the earth. It was a horrifying, unspeakable thought. But in their minds, it was the only way. Zofia's body was laid in the cold, unyielding earth. The ritual of safety had begun, even if Zofia had never truly been allowed a chance to live. Was it possible, though? Was it truly a mistake, a cruel error that sentenced Zofia to a fate worse than death? Or had the family simply believed so strongly in their superstition that they could no longer see the difference between protection and murder? The answer remains buried with her. As the earth settled over Zofia's grave, the weight of her family's superstition became a permanent scar, not just on the soil, but on their souls. What began as a twisted form of protection, the desire to guard loved ones from a fate far worse than death, ultimately led to the unimaginable tragedy of a young bride's life snuffed out before it could truly begin. In the chilling silence of that grave, buried beneath layers of dirt and bone, Zofia's story becomes a tragic reminder of the power of fear and the devastating consequences when love is distorted by superstition. The question lingers in the dark corners of history. Could it have been prevented? Could anyone have stopped the ancient rituals that led to her untimely burial? The answer may never come. But what we do know is that stories like Zofia's are not just relics of the past. They are warnings, echoes of the dangers of unchecked belief, the perils of blindly following tradition, and the deep unhealed wounds of the human heart. As we reflect on Zofia's life and the brutal impact of her family's fear, we are reminded of how fragile life is and how much of it can be lost to the shadows of superstition, myth, and terror. Her story, though tragic, continues to haunt us, asking us to question the boundaries between life and death, belief and reason, protection and cruelty. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness of medieval Poland. If this story left you questioning the fine line between myth and reality and how the echoes of the past continue to shape us today, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you next time, where we will unearth more forgotten tales, each darker and more mysterious than the last.